In today's video, we're going to cover the last steps of the supplier negotiation and payment process. And I'm actually going to cover the document. And by the way, I've attached this document below in both a Pages and a Word document format, whether you're using Mac or PC. And what this is a purchase order agreement, as you can kind of see right here. And what a purchase order agreement is a document that just ensures that both you and your supplier are on the same page in terms of product costs, production time, shipping, payment terms, all that information. Just basically recapping everything to make sure that everything's going to run smoothly and that you're both in agreement and understanding. Okay, so that's the purpose of this document. The purpose is not to protect you in court if anything were to go wrong, God forbid. But yeah, so this won't have any kind of legal standing, right? Although there are some portions that'll sound kind of, have some legal jargon. And that is just, to come across professionally, and by the way, a lot of sellers do not, especially a lot of new sellers do not use the purchase order agreement when kind of finalizing payment terms with suppliers. So you're going to come across as much more professional. It's definitely, this alone for you, just to go through this, even if you weren't to have your supplier sign this, but just for yourself, is really great to make sure you recap and cover everything that you need to and make sure everything's good to go in terms of getting your product, purchasing your product, setting it into Amazon, and kind of that entire process, okay? So yeah, very, very important. I use this for all of my with all my suppliers. And again, this is going to put you much further ahead than 90% of other Amazon sellers. All right. So I'll just kind of run through this document, hopefully relatively briefly. I know it's not going to be super fun, but hopefully it will be very, very helpful to you. So I'll go ahead and go through that now. As you see, right, I have a lot of kind of supplier name, your company, enter date, etc. So you'll have to kind of take this document and edit it to your specific needs, right? And to your relationship and contract with your supplier, right? So there's going to be some parts that may be missing, some parts that are unnecessary, right? So it's up to you to kind of delete or add those parts that are. Again, it completely depends on your specific situation. So yeah, I have a lot of those kind of points, those parts here that it's kind of fill in for yourself. All right, so purchase order agreement. Your company, right, known as first party, agrees to enter into this purchasing agreement with supplier company name known as second party. This agreement is based on the following provisions. Production. Second party agrees to produce the following goods. X quantity of Y products, right? So, 100 books, if you were producing books for whatever reason. Second party will assemble, fill, and secure a, whatever your packaging is, whether that's plastic bag, box with shrink wrap, etc., multiplied by the number of packages, and then a labor cost of, whatever that labor cost is. And again, the supplier will give you the labor cost for, filling and securing whatever bags or boxes that you have. So you'll just enter that in here, just kind of recap or restate the price that they quoted you. Will be paid by the first party to cover assembly costs. And then each set should include X. So that could be, thank you card and ribbon and shrink wrap and whatever the kind of any extra things really that each set should include. You'll go ahead and enter that in. If not, you can go ahead and delete that. And then a UPC code will be provided by the first party and printed and attached by second party, right? Very straightforward, and we already covered that in previous videos. And if the plastic bag, and this is important, if the plastic bag has a 12.7 centimeter opening or larger, measured when flat, they should have a suffocation warning either printed on the bag itself or attached as a label, right? So it's American law that if you have a plastic bag, 12.7 centimeters or larger, that you must have a suffocation warning, okay? So you want to make sure that you have that. I will say there are sellers who don't use this and they kind of get away with it, but again, I definitely recommend, like I said with anything, abiding by the law is usually a good course of action, so I definitely recommend that and make sure you have that in there. X units per case, right? There's a certain number of units that are going to fit in each case, right? And then the total number of cases that you're sending to Amazon. Again, kind of recapping what we covered in the shipping, in the kind of shipping plan and shipping modules. Then the second party agrees to the cost of, so the total cost, right, of X US dollars, per package cost, and then the total number of packages, very straightforward. And then production time, right? Because you're going to ask your supplier, right, how long is it going to take to produce this many units, right? 1,000 units, 2,000, 750, whatever it is. How long is it going to take to produce? And they'll tell you. And usually it's around 30 days. However, this definitely varies. It'll be shorter or faster, or less, shorter or longer, depending on your specific product. But yeah, it's around 30 days. So you can kind of enter it. Let's just say it's 30 days. We'd enter it in here. The production time for the product name exceeds the agreed upon production time, X days after payment, is confirmed. The first party requires advance notice of at least 3 days in order to respond appropriately. If production time is delayed for more than 3 days, et cetera, and really the rest is just kind of like that legal jargon that I kind of mentioned. You can kind of read through that, but just basically act in good faith. Don't delay shit. Like just do. Let's just make sure that we both do what we agreed to do. Okay. I won't bore you. I won't try to bore you with the details. I'm sure I'm already boring enough. Inspection. So you want to include the section. Whether, and like I covered in a previous video, you can opt in for an inspection company or not to kind of go through your products and make sure there's no defects and everything's okay. Whether you are using a third-party inspection service or inspecting at your own home, or the third option, which is what I do most often, I make sure I get, and I'll kind of go through that here, but a lot of images to make sure that everything looks good to go. And I get those from my suppliers. So whether you're using an inspection service or not, you want to include the section, all right? So the first party reserves the right to a third-party inspection. So you do have that right, of course. And the second party agrees to an internal inspection required by the first party. The points of inspection required are, and again, you'll change this wording whether it's an internal inspection or if this is an external inspection by company X, right? The inspection service that you go with, right? But you want to make sure you get pictures of each product style as they're being manufactured, as they're being assembled, pictures of the first case being loaded with the box open, and then picture of the full shipment and all the cases, right? So you want to get multiple pictures of each. And I really stress getting images. Really, when you get enough images, I've kind of eliminated the need for an inspection service company, in my opinion. However, again, if this is your first time, I may recommend that, right? That you get an inspection service, or at least, the very least, right? Get lots and lots of images, okay? And that's the inspection section. Next, we have shipping. Again, all of this you've probably already covered with your supplier. You're just kind of recapping at this point. So shipping will be handled by a third-party forwarder, but obviously because they're not going to ship the units themselves, they'll either work to kind of help you find a forwarder or you'll find a forwarder yourself. But shipping will be handled by a third-party forwarder, but second party agrees to deliver all cases to the nearest port, which will later be established by first party. The second party also agrees to print case labeling in accordance with the list below. Box dimensions and weight may be modified after accurate measurement of such. So you want the product type. So whatever your product is, like books, right? We'll say randomly it's books. Case quantity. So, the quantity of cases, right? The number of cases. You want to make sure it's made in China. The gross weight in kilograms, and then the box dimensions in centimeters, length, width, and height, right? Not just the length and the width, but you need the full, volume, box dimensions, right? So 3 dimensions. Confidential information. So we're almost done, actually. It's really not that complicated, but this just kind of helps you put all your thoughts together. In the confidential information section, I'm not going to read through it all, but basically that they agree to not either kind of steal your product and start selling kind of the product that you developed in your private label product on Amazon, and that they also will not share this with anybody else, any other manufacturer, any other seller, etc. Right? Just kind of keep your information confidential. And then finally, the payment and approvals section, right? Especially the payment section. This may be the most important section and the section you probably have the most questions about, right? Because it is very important when you're sending money overseas to a foreign country that you may have never done business with before, right? And it's really not as scary as it sounds and really shouldn't be if you follow the steps that I've laid out and these steps as well. So for payment, at this point, you've already agreed to a certain amount of money. What you haven't agreed yet is when that money is going to be paid and how it's going to be paid, by what platform, right? It's not obviously going to be in cash. You're not going to carry cash over to China, probably not. So it's going to be in some other kind of method. So I'll cover those both now. First, when I started on Amazon FBA and I was ordering and paying for units, I would usually do 50% upfront before and then 50% once production ends. That I do not recommend that, and I don't personally do that anymore. The reason is you lose a lot of leverage, right? Money is powerful. Money is leverage. So if you pay for your entire order before they get shipped, once they get shipped, the supplier in theory really doesn't care, right? And a lot of times they honestly do. Like they want, because that ultimately, they could lose return business if anything went wrong. But they have the money, it's a lot easier for them not to care, I should say. Okay, it's a lot easier for them not to care when all the money is has already been paid. So here's what I recommend, okay? You want to pay in kind of three kind of installments, right? Three different processes, right? So the first step of the process, right, is to pay 30% of the total amount before production starts. They need something, right? They're not going to produce all your units and then say, hey, we produce your units. And then you're like, oh yeah, we don't want them anymore, bye. And they're like, that wouldn't be good business for them. That's a risk to them. So you'll want to make sure you pay 30% of the total amount upfront before production. All right. Next, you want to pay 40% after, and this is all, again, this is my opinion. This is what I found personally works best. And there's a lot of big time sellers, meaning multi-million-dollar per year Amazon sellers that do the exact same strategy here. It's actually kind of where I learned this strategy. I network with a lot of these sellers. So the next, you want to pay 40% of the total amount, right? So this is now a total of 70%. But the next 40% after production ends, okay? So now you've paid 70%, all right? So you have 30% left. That remaining 30%, in my opinion, right? And this is what I do, and this is what I recommend. You pay that once the products have been cleared through U.S. Customs, okay? So once they've cleared through Customs, they're on their way to Amazon's warehouse. You can't really, withhold payment if, hey, we want to make sure it gets, Amazon stocks it correctly and all that. Because once it gets into Amazon or it's on its way to Amazon, it's kind of out of their hands, right? So it's really good to kind of pay the remaining amount and pay it all once it's cleared Customs. And that 30%, which is still a decent amount, that's almost a third, is going to be very powerful leverage in case, and hopefully nothing goes wrong, right? And a lot of times, everything runs perfectly smoothly the majority of the time. But in those occasions that something might go wrong or delay or whatever, that 30% is actually going to help you, right? And you can use that as leverage. And it's basically going to get the supplier to care a little bit more. Okay, so that's kind of the reasoning. So just to recap, 30% before production, 40% right after production, and then 30% right after the products clear Customs. Okay, that's what I recommend. And you might get some pushback from your supplier, but you can always respond and say, hey, this is our first time doing this. We know, we feel that this properly kind of allocates the risk out, or however you want to kind of word it. But one thing I really like to make clear is this is our first order. We want to make sure it runs well. If things run well, we can always renegotiate on future orders that we will be placing with you, right? We're definitely, if everything runs well and we sell well on Amazon, which we definitely will, we're definitely going to come back to you and reorder units, and we're going to sustain that long-term relationship with you. That's always a really good point to bring up. Okay, so there's that, and these are the terms that I have. Be firm on these terms. It's very important. Again, I used to run kind of 50-50, 50 before production, 50% after. I didn't have any problems with that. However, again, networking and talking to these multi-million-dollar sellers, right, who do it very different, or who did it, a little bit differently, and I've now implemented my own business. This is now what I recommend, right? It's much safer, gives you a little bit more power kind of throughout the entire production and shipping process. So I'd be firm on that. This is very typical. Again, this isn't weird. This isn't like, oh, this person needs special treatment. They still might push back a little bit because obviously they'd ultimately prefer 100% right up front. But be firm on your kind of on your payment plan and say we can always renegotiate in the future. However, I recommend kind of having the same pattern for every time you order from the supplier and all your suppliers. Okay, so that's kind of the money allocation and when you're going to kind of pay. Now the big question is, how do I pay? Right, like I'm sending money to China. How do I do that safely and effectively and efficiently? So there are only two methods of payment that I recommend. One is PayPal, and number two is Alibaba Trade Assurance wire transfer, or really just referred to as Alibaba Trade Assurance. Those are the only two that I'd recommend, and here's why. So one with PayPal, right? So I would definitely recommend using PayPal only, and don't use anything outside of PayPal or Alibaba Trade Assurance, and especially for your first order, do not use anything outside of PayPal, in my opinion, and here's why. With PayPal, opposed to other forms of transferring money, there's a significantly higher likelihood that if you send your money in with PayPal and something goes wrong or anything goes wrong, you're able to retrieve that money later, okay? Again, it's not guaranteed, and also hopefully nothing goes wrong, right, to where that happens. But of course, you always want to be safe and play it as safe as possible. So PayPal is a really great platform to kind of do that, right? So there's a lot higher likelihood of kind of casting your net out, right? Like kind of putting your money in. If something goes wrong, they're more likely of getting that back out, opposed to like a Western Union wire transfer or other payment types, okay? With that being said, so it is, in my opinion, the safest for you, okay? So it's the best option for you. However, there's also currently at making this video, there's a 3% fee associated with sending money over. And again, when you're buying a few $1,000s worth of product, right, that 3% kind of adds up. Again, if it's your first time selling, I highly recommend PayPal. Even with that fee, just take that into account and kind of, account for that in your total product cost. It's a 3% fee, again, at the making of this video. But double check, of course, before you go ahead and write that down. But it's about 3%. And again, that 3%, it's going to help you, keep your money as safe as possible and the best kind of transfer possible. And then also Alibaba Trade Assurance. The benefit with that is it does not have the 3% fee. In terms of the downside, there's not really a downside, and here's what I mean by that. So I used to only use PayPal, right? That's what a lot of Amazon and sellers will use, when dealing with Alibaba suppliers. However, that 3% fee, we had one of our suppliers say, hey, can we just, use Trade Assurance? We've already done business with you before. Everything's going to go I hope you can trust us. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to venture out. And a few months ago, I started using Trade Assurance, had no problem. Started using it with other suppliers, had no problem. So it was only a benefit because, I didn't have to pay that 3% fee with PayPal, right? So I saved some money kind of in that regard. Alibaba Trade Assurance, is marketed as being very safe and all that. However, like I said, a lot of sellers and from a lot of research that I've done, most sellers will use PayPal. But I now find that a lot more sellers are starting to use Trade Assurance more and more often. And even new sellers. However, the reason I'm not recommending it, right, because it sounds like a much better option. So why wouldn't I recommend it? I don't recommend it yet because I still don't believe it's as safe as PayPal. And I really don't feel like I have or other sellers have really started using this enough and there's enough kind of really data collected from this for me to really recommend it. I don't want to recommend anything that's going to, cause problems. I especially will definitely not recommend anything that's going to make you lose thousands of dollars, okay? Right? I would feel horrible, right? And I will not and have not done that throughout this entire course. I want to give you the very best information. So the safest option by far that I would recommend is PayPal and pay the 3% fee. If you really don't want to pay the 3% fee, and let's say you do some additional research and you're really finding this new seller has used Trade Assurance and they didn't have a problem. This seller didn't either. And you feel like you want to move forward with Alibaba Trade Assurance, the wire transfer with them, then you can go ahead and do that, right? I have no power in terms of banning you from that. However, it's not as safe in my opinion than PayPal, or at least it hasn't been proven to be as safe as PayPal. So you kind of use it as your own risk. But those are the two options. I started off using PayPal. I still use a little bit of PayPal, but I'm now moving more to Alibaba Trade Assurance. Those are the two options. Those are the only two options, however, that I would recommend. And hopefully that makes sense. I know it's kind of all over the place a little bit, but those are the two options I'd recommend. Again, 30%, upfront before production, 40% after production, and then 30% once your products have cleared customs. All right. Then the final section, very simple. This agreement is entered into on X date, 2019 or 20 or whatever, by your company and the supplier company name. And then what I do is I just go ahead and I do this for a lot of my documents. I've created a digital signature. So I'll just type in, handwritten signature generator online, type in my name, and then I'll just kind of copy and paste this in future documents, but really doesn't matter. Enter in your name, the date. You'll save this document, edit it, make sure you sign the approval section, and then you'll go ahead and send that over to your suppliers and make sure that they have it printed off. They print it off, sign it, and then scan it back to you. And they can honestly even take pictures of it if it's signed, or they can scan it and then send it to you that way. But make sure that this is signed and scanned and documented right before you pay. Okay, that's what I recommend. And this will help. Just going through this on your own is going to help you really make sure that you have all the questions you need to answer. It's going to help you and your supplier both be on the same page. So I hope this was helpful. If you do have any questions, of course, as always, leave those in the comments below and I'll get back to them as soon as possible. I mean, guys, it's pretty much like free mentorship. So, use this while I still have time to answer people's questions. If you did like this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up below and hit the subscribe button because I have a lot of great videos on this channel and a lot more great content coming to you very soon. And I want to make sure that you are notified and take advantage of that. As always, thanks so much for watching and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.